right, so that we're going to be recording. I hope that it turns out okay. We'll see. I think it should be fine, but I don't have like the good microphone here. All right, so I'm creating this new file and save that file. And I've saved that file. And now is when we will start working on phaser itself. So first I'm gonna type like with and also I'll send you the source code with the comments and everything. So first I'll type in in English what we're doing, and then I will add the code. So the first thing we're doing is that we are creating what's called a state. And a state is just where your game takes place. For example, if you only have one screen with one game, that's one state. If you have a home screen, and then the game, and then a game over screen, that's 3 states. So we're going to create one single state. And then we need to create a new phaser game. So that we actually start a new game, right? So we create, and these two can go in the different order. So if you want, we can actually do it in the other order. Doesn't really matter. Maybe it's more clear if it's like this. So we create a new game, then we create a state, then we assign state to the game. When we create the state, it's a separate element, and then we tell it, listen, we created a game, and I would like this game to use this state. Then we simply start the state. In this case, we start the game, because there's only one state. So that is starting the game. All right, so a new phaser game will be a variable, a JavaScript variable. So I'm going to type var game. I'm going to call it game. And this will be new phaser.game. That is because we are using phaser, we can do this. And in here, I have to set the resolution of my game, how many pixels wide and how many pixels tall. It will be 640 pixels wide and 360 pixels tall. 360 tall. That is a common. There is a common resolution. It's 16:9 ratio. So it's quite common on phones, on TVs these days, kind of like that. And then we need to. This is a bit more advanced. So I'm going to type phaser.auto. And just to explain what this is, it has to do with whether we're using WebGL or not, the 3D stuff that I was showing before. If you set it to auto, you don't have to worry about it, it will just work. So now that we have a game, let's create a state. And for that, I'm going to go and create another variable, and I'm going to call this game state. I'll call it like that with uppercase. It doesn't matter, in JavaScript, it's you can define this uppercase, lowercase. You just need to be consistent. So if you create an uppercase, you keep it in uppercase. For some reason, I've never really thought about it, but people tend to write the states in uppercase like so. It's an empty object. There's nothing in it, and then the semicolon to close that sentence. We're going to add things to it very shortly. Then, how do we assign the state to our game? Otherwise our game doesn't know what it has to play, what it has to open. We type game.state, .add, and then we give our state a name. So I'm going to call it game state, just like the name of the variable. And then I type the name of the variable to pass it on. So we're basically saying add this game state, and we're going to call it game state. So this is all a bit of a technicality, but once you get over the basics, once you have the image on the screen, then you just build on top of this. And then on the other games, you always start with this done. You don't have to type it each time. All right, so now how do we start the game? We just type game.state again, .start, and then we pass it the name of the state that we want to start, which is game state. So once we have all of that in our code, I'm going to go back to the web browser, and I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to click where it says inspect somewhere at the bottom, and it will open this thing here. And I'm going to expand this a little bit, and in here I'm gonna go and click console. And now I'm going to reload the page. Oh, sorry. So we created main.js, but we haven't included it in the HTML file. So the HTML file doesn't know about it. So we need to go, now that we completed this file, we go back to our HTML file, and we can just copy this code here and paste it in here, and just replace this main.min with phaser.min by main, so that now we know about it. So once you do that, now we can go back to the page and refresh the page. And we will see here if you got this thing open, and if not, let me know and I can do it again. If you got this thing open and you click console, you are gonna see phaser version 2. You're also gonna see some error here, but ignore that because we haven't added anything yet. But it will say phaser. This is that we are running phaser. Okay, so if we get that, it means that we are on the right track. All right. So now that we got phaser running, we actually want to show something. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so go inside of game 1.
I'm getting an error in the one.
And so the function found. So let's go to see file first. Yes. Is that right?
Yeah, you got love hearts.
I've got love hearts.
Is it
Feel
the
the love.
exact same?
Feel the love.
Is it the
Thank
right
you.
Well, you see Sprite, so let's set it up.
Yeah, let's say.
More than 10.
So, Pablo,
It's what? More than 10. You're exhausted already. No, I just want to stop all my head. We're not doing my eye today. Yeah, it's got nice.
Lost it with Max.
you know, just click on it.
Yeah, just click on it. And
Now go into game 1.
Now, yeah, there
That's
you
it,
go.
that's
Yeah,
it.
that's
Right,
it. Yeah.
index.
Index, yes. And now to see the stuff that I'm showing.
Yeah, I'm good to inspect.
Yeah, inspect. Anyone? Any question? You could. Okay. All right. So let's show the first screen on the first image on the screen. So all the states in phaser have. In here, we're going to add a few methods. So just like a quick summary of objects in JavaScript. In JavaScript, you can create these objects, and you use the curly brackets. And in here, you can add different properties and different functions. So there are some functions that need to be present in phaser or that are used in phaser. And a very important one is called create. Create, yes. So you type create, colon, and then you type function, and then these brackets, and then curly brackets, and enter. And everything that we add here will be inside of the create function. So I'm going to add another line here, and I'm going to type what this is. I'm going to type when create takes place. Create takes place or is executed after the images are loaded. So how do we load the images? We haven't loaded the images yet, so we need to add another method up here. So I'm going to add it in here. And this method is called preload. So preload and the colon function, brackets again, curly brackets again, enter. And then I make sure to add a comma here, because then we have another, we have this one here, so they need to be separated by a comma, or you get an error. And this preload method, it is where we load all the images, sounds, assets. All the assets are loaded there. So what assets do we have that we can load? If I go and open the file, my files again, we had this JS folder, and we also had a folder called assets. And inside that folder, we had a few images. So I'm going to go and grab this. There's an image here called octopus.png, and I want to load that into my game. So inside of preload, I'm going to load the octopus. And for that, I type this.load.sprite. Sprites are images in Phaser, and sprites can have animations, they can respond to user interaction. So I'm going to load the sprite, and for that I have to give the sorry, not sprite, the image. Sorry about that, image. And I have to give my image a tag, a name that we can use later in the code. So I'm going to call this, let's call it player. And then I have to type the location of that image, so comma. The location of the image is assets/octopus.png. And then semicolon to finish that statement. So we are telling Phaser, go to assets, find octopus.png, load that, and then we will refer to this as player. Now on create is where we create our sprite. And we need to have the image loaded. So here I'm going to go to type this.add.sprite. And then I have to enter the coordinates. So to enter the coordinates, I need to show you something first inside of this presentation. The coordinates in Phaser start from the top left corner. So it is different than how it's normally done in math. It is positive towards this direction on X, and it is positive when you go down on Y. For example, the point X equals 10 and Y equals 6 will be in here. So we need to know that, and now that we know that, we can show our first sprite on Phaser. Let's say some coordinate. Let's say that it's going to be, remember that our screen is 300, where is it, up here? It is 640 and 360. So let's show it, let's say 200 and 100. And then we enter the name of that we gave this image. So we can copy this player like so, and we can paste it in here, and close that with the semicolon, and save. So after you've saved that, after you've done that, if you go to your web browser and refresh the page, so we're always going to be refreshing the page here. Now we see the octopus on the screen. And the console should be always open, because if there's any errors, it will be shown on that console. In this case, there weren't any errors. So, any questions up to this point?
Yeah, just trying to go back to this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that needs to go. Yeah. So if you're gonna type, it needs to be in a comment when you're gonna write notes. There's semicolon there. Oh yeah. Mine's there. Maybe it's not.
Maybe it's just that's got
Is it? It's not safe. The other one.
all people to auto.
There was another one.
Difference and
You see the other.
So before that one, put another one.
Oh, it's inside of JS.
Actually, there's
It's
usually a
JS.
comment mark in this bracket. So I'm guessing this varies with a couple of arguments on this, so pre-aggregation. So this bracket thing.
Oh, that's down here.
I've never seen it. Just a comma. I've never seen that in a language before. Yeah.
Oh, no.
So just missing that comma, I noticed.
Oh, comma.
Yeah. I've not seen that in language before.
Oh, really? Yeah, in JavaScript, I can show like an example of objects. Basically, you could have a functions like that, they separate by comma. Or you can have properties, like for example, like curly brackets, health, color, and position.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's an open one.
Let's go to the console, see if there's any error.
It worked out?
No errors, and also not showing the phaser stuff. See your main, your
Yeah, actually, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
correct. This is
Is
the
it
same.
working out? Yeah.
And is that the
I can make
this is the correct file? Like, is it the exact same?
It's actually hidden underneath that.
Can we go back to the browser?
Still not?
Press
Actually, 12 plus the 8 one because the last.
and also at the click that
Have a comma there, not a semicolon. Change that to a comma, not a semicolon. And then get rid of that semicolon.
Oh no, this is a different file than the one that you are monitoring. It's a different location.
Perhaps maybe not. I was going to keep that original string.
So I think that's the file that you're opening here.
I'm surprised I got one of the
So it is very design work products.
You might be able to find my
Location key might be
should all be because I just it's all zip
It needs to be the same one, so whichever it is, it needs to be the same one. Okay, we can find that one.
Brackets, how do I identify, how do I have a file that's 10?
Oh, that's an extension.
This one here, Valgame, that one.
It's just
And then game one.
no, it's just like the static file up there.
Okay, you've got it up there,
And,
okay.
Oh,
So it is
that's
not.
where a few of them.
No, because then we can use
No, it is not, okay. Oh, that's
yeah.
They might, Visual Studio might do it now with restarting the machine. It sort of confuses and Visual Studio wasn't autocomplete.
They edit the file.
If it wasn't in right there, then they would adjust on right.
Yeah, we'll have to
Declaring the variable you got up the top.
Yeah, he's got it at the top, I just didn't read mine around.
Did I catch one?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Because I used to do access.
It was just, yeah.
I just wanted to distribute to
Maybe he'll be able to fix it.
other machines.
I can't.
And so
Yeah.
that's it. This may not be all ones you're going to. I was just reading the
Then
header.
you go to the
I was back there as well, so.
I need to check.
I've got those VMs on here.
There's some teaching about
It's in, you can see it, should be able to see it there in assets.
Is it volume?
You see, all the little white link, see that Explorer. You can just close that. Oh, and zip files up, zip things on here, you get these crap macros.
Assets?
Files, yeah, kids extract them.
No,
So, these
that looks good, it looks
There you
interesting.
go.
The website.
It was your website today.
So I'm just pressing one
Oh,
when
you're showing everywhere.
If I do that,
Oh,
I think it is,
or do I need to restart brackets for that?
probably place that here. So this file that you have here is not the same file that you were editing for.
that should be.
Is it saved? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, thank you.
so find the extensions like.
That's why I make all the money.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
actually
Okay,
wants it, so it's
yeah,
a
that
bit
makes
wide
sense
up
then.
there.
Yeah. It has to be something really simple.
Let's show now a background. So we've got the first image, and now I want to show this background image. And so to show a second image, I do the same thing. So I can copy this statement here, and I can press enter here. And then I'm gonna call this image. I give it a different name. Let's call it background, or let's just BG. And the file name is background.png. So now we can place the background is to place before the player, so that the player shows on top of the background.
So the order of the instructions is from the bottom of the
Yep.
layers up.
Yeah. And for that, I can also copy this and paste it here. But I'll show you. And now, how can we where should we position this background? Depends. Let's 0, 0, yeah. Because I'll show you, and you'll see the result here. Huh.
VG, I think you call it. didn't you?
Oh yeah. And so why is it that we position in 0, 0? Because we have something called in phaser, something called the anchor point on Sprite. And by default, the anchor point of a Sprite is its top left corner. And the anchor point is what when you say to a Sprite, go in these coordinates, that is the point that will go on that coordinate. In some occasions, you might want to be able to have the anchor point in the middle of the image, because for a background it's fine because it's easy to place on 0, 0, but let's say that we want to place some other image in a different position, and also if you when we rotate images, they rotate about their anchor point. So to place the anchor point in a different position, the anchor point starts at 0, and you can set it all the way to 1 on X and all the way to 1 on Y. For it to go in the center is 0.5, 0.5, and that's used for positioning, scaling, and rotation. So I'm gonna change the anchor point of my player to the middle. Now I need to access my player, and I don't know how to access it from here. What I can do here is place this in a variable. And now I can access this variable here and change its anchor point by typing .anchor and then anchor, and then we can do set to like so. It's a method of the Sprite that allows us to set the anchor point, and I will set it. I can do it like so: x, y, 0, 0, 0, 5, 0, 5. Or if I just set it once, it applies the same one to both. But I'll set it like this so that it's more explicit.
This is all in the create function.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, that's great.
yes. So if we go now and if you refresh the page, you will see that the position of the octopus it looks kind of like it changed, because before we were placing it, this was the top left corner. So that point here used to be here. So that is an important concept when it comes to sprites. And now let's do a bit of scaling and rotation as well. We can change the scale in X and Y. Let's say that we want to double the size of the sprite. We can type player.scale.set to 2, and then we it's going to be twice as big. So if I go here and refresh the page, you will see how we scaled it up. And I will actually create some more sprites so we have a little bit more octopus to play with, not just that one. So besides creating the player, I'm going to create some more of these characters. So I'm going to go and copy and paste that line 2 more times. And I have to call them something different, so let's call them like character 1 or character 2. And see how they will all use the same image, but they will be different sprites and they will be in different coordinates. So set other coordinates values here. You can pick whichever number you want that is within the size of the game. So see how now we are creating 3 different sprites. And also let's change the anchor point of all of them. So I can position them in the middle. So I'm going to copy and paste this code again. And this one will be for character 1. And this one will be for character 2. And if I save that and if I refresh the page, I can see that we've got the 3 of them now there. We actually have a little bit more room to put them a bit further away. So what I'm going to do is change the scale of them as well, of the other ones, of one more of them. I will move them a little bit more to the right so they're not so close to each other. So let's actually make this one on 100 and this one on 300 and this one on 500. So they're a bit more separated. And now let's change the scale of character 1 and make it half the size. So char1.scale.set2, and to make it half the size, we type 0.5, and now it is half the size. So if I execute this, if I run this, we made it much smaller than the other one. So we have one that is scale 1. The scale hasn't been changed, the size hasn't been changed. This one has been reduced to half the size, and this one has been increased to 2 times the size. And we could also just change the scale on either X and Y or either Y and X. And that's what I'll do with character 2. So for character 2, I'll make it twice as tall. So I'll keep the scale at 1 for X. We're not changing the scale. And the scale on Y will be, let's say, 3. So it will look very distorted. If we bring it up and press refresh the page, we've made it like so. And the scaling takes place from the anchor point. So that the anchor point remains in the same position and everything else around it is scaled. So besides scaling, there's 2 more things that we'll do here, like similar things. One of them is how to flip it, so make it like a mirror itself. And to do that, you simply set the scale to -1 on one of the 2 coordinates, and that will flip it to the other side. So it keeps the same size, but it is made to the other direction. So I will delete this part here, or I'll cut that and paste it here. And we're going to flip it on Y. So I'm going to keep X1 and for 1 -1. And that will, if I refresh here, we've made it to the other side. We flipped it on Y. And the last of these operations is rotation. How we can rotate a character. And I'm going to add another character here. So I'm going to copy and paste that. Let's call this character 3. And this one will be located a little bit more like down at the bottom. So this will be something like 250. And I will leave this at 500. I'm going to set also the anchor point to the middle. So copy, paste, and change that to 3. And now I can type in character 3.angle, and the angle we can set it to, for example, 45 degrees, and that is with the right hand, so it is counter-clock side. So if I do that and if I press F5 in my computer, we've rotated it. Actually, I think that went clockwise, so I'll type it here, clockwise. So we can now scale, we can rotate, and we can flip. So those are basic sprite operations. And before you guys build your first game, which is going to be like a simple quiz question, there are a couple more topics that we have to do. So,
Can you just show me the rotation?
yeah, sure. Angle. So something else that I want to add now is some text, how we can show text on the screen, on the game. And I'm sorry, are there any questions until this point? Like, is there anyone need me to look at? Any errors or any questions?
Yeah, no, you have to create this. Is there any error in the console? Background not found, so let's go code. So the name here, when you preload the file, it has to be set to the same name that you will use the in case it's really nice. So written exactly. Character line undefined, and it says line number 31, so we call line number 31. Character should be character 1.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah. And change numbers too.
I like the little hearts.
Yeah, I'll just, there's a variable declaration you come in anyway,
Yeah.
that's those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll that as well.
Okay. So
You're on it, go for it.
Yeah, you can't. It's not like Python where you can just type variable name and just keep on going.
all right, so we're gonna learn how to add text to the screen, and adding text can also be done here in Create. So after all of our sprite things, I'm gonna add some text here, and again the text will be, because we added our sprites first, now the text will be added on top of the sprites. If we added the text before the background, then the background would have actually covered the text. So
This could be used for scores or
scores, instructions, game over, anything. And so for the text, we first need to create the text style. And that is a JavaScript variable, so I'm going to call it text style, like so, or just, style. And it is, again, one of these objects. So I'm going to add the curly brackets and add the semicolon. And now I'm going to press enter right there in the middle so we can add some properties. So the first property is the font. And so I type font, colon, and then quotes. It's going to be a string of, and then we can add the size here. The size in this case will be 60 pixels, so 60 px, and then space, and I can type in Arial for the font family. Then comma, a new property, and now the color of the text is what's called a hexadecimal code, the same as in CSS. So for example, FFF is white. And if you're not sure of a color and if you want to find out, it's quite easy to find out. So what you'd search for is color hex. And there are pages that have like all the colors with their codes. So you would use that would be the code that you have to enter. In this case, I'm gonna use white. And then we can type align and type center so that the text looks aligned in the center. And now I'm gonna create the text itself. Those are just the properties of the text. We haven't created any text. So now create the text. And this will be, we will type this.add. So same that we did with the sprites, right? With the sprites, we also type this.add. But now it will be this.add.text. and then we need to enter the coordinates of this text. Let's say somewhere like 300 and maybe 30. And now we need to pass on what the text content will be. What exactly are we going to show? And we can show something like hello world. That is the text that we will show. And then we pass on that style that we created. And semicolon and save. And after doing that, we now should be able to see the text on our game. So I'm going to go back to the game and refresh the page. And I can see that text up here, hello world. So that is how we can show text. And what about sound? What if we want to play a sound? Actually, the sound will cover on game 2 or game 3, not on game 1. So there's only one more thing we cover here, and then we're going to go into challenge time and also do our tea, our break. So the last part we'll do here.
What challenge?
We might get voted off the island.
The last part here is to do something when the user clicks on a sprite, right? Because games are interactive. Games are not just showing things. So now we're going to make our game interactive. And for that, it is the sort of stuff where you're going to be like, what is that big line of code? And my response will be, you can just copy that and use it each time, because it goes through like a lot of this, dot this, dot this, dot this. But I will explain you what it means. And the more you use phaser, that sort of stuff actually starts to make sense. So let's first enable. The first step to make something interactive is to enable input on the sprite. So which one of our sprites do you want me to make interactive? How about player? So I'm going to copy player and paste player here. And now I'm going to type dot input enabled, like so, equals true, and semicolon. So with this, we're telling phaser this sprite here, this guy here, is going to be accessed on the input. So we're going to be able to either click or touch on a touch screen. And now what happens when you click? Now, when you click or touch, that is what we do here. So before we can do that, we actually need to create a method, another function that we will use for when the user clicks. And so I'm going to type at the end of my create method. So we've got our create method here, right? At the very end of that method, I'm going to type a comma and create a new method here for us to use. And this method, let's rotate our sprite. Let's make it so that we rotate our sprite every time that we click on it. So we rotate it by, I don't know, 30 degrees. So this will be another function here. And that function is what's going to be called every time that you click on your sprite. And this function, somehow it's going to know what the sprite is that we clicked. So it will have a parameter here called sprite. So that when we use this function and you click on the sprite, this code here will be executed. Each time that you click, this code here will be executed. And what will happen here is that sprite we will modify the rotation of the sprite so that the new rotation of the sprite will be equal to the old rotation of the sprite plus, let's say, 30 degrees. And if you're more familiar with JavaScript, this is actually the same as typing sprite.rotation plus equal 30. So we know now what will happen when you click on the sprite, and we know that somehow we will get access to that sprite. So now all we have to do is make that link, make that happen. So for that, we're going to type player dot events dot on input down, like so, and then dot add. So it's a lot of things, like I said. But it's basically we're accessing the events of the player, then we're telling it when somebody clicks or somebody touches, add whatever we will add here. And what will we add here is this dot rotate sprite. Oops. This means in the current object. So in the current object, there is a method called rotate sprite. And then something else we need to pass here is that this, just so that the rotate sprite keeps track, uses the same object as we currently are in. And this is like more advanced in case you had this method in like a different object or something. So that is the part that I said that you can just kind of memorize or like just copy and paste. Basically, the takeaway here is that we access our sprite. On input down means when we click on it, and this is a method that we're interested in, rotate sprite, and that method needs to have the sprite like so. So if we save that and go to the game. Oh, sorry, you need more time to copy it. Yeah.
The
very first one. Yeah.
Is this working?
Yeah.
It's working.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
I'm not sure which one is it.
It's the big one.
Yeah.
It's the big one. Should be that one.
Oh. Oh, so sorry, this wasn't rotation, it's angle.
Oh, mine was working.
Because rotation actually is also used, but it's in radians. And I thought I'll just use one of them. Yeah, there we go. So that's on the guide. Like you'll see that there's exercises on the guide, and you'll work on them later. All right. So once everyone got this working, I'll show the first challenge, and it'll be very like it'll be you can copy and paste a lot of this, and it'll be like simple. And I'll walk around and I'll help you all. So has anyone got this any issue with this or no? Oh, it's events.
Yeah, one. Andrew's getting it. It's in hospitality. We don't do that. Yeah, we do it more. Travel design.
So you're quite keen to go into this design because
But see, yeah, but see, we've got graphics and standalone by itself. So we need to learn 12. And
so we don't have it.
you know, we have it standalone in Preload and 12. So I don't teach it. Caroline don't intend teaching it.
So
That's someone
what
else.
does that become the new service is visual graphics? And just that design groups.
That's you guys ready to work? And then you've got what else is there? There's what's replacing the one.
There's food technology.
That's coming in.
And fashion, are you doing that?
Fashion is doing fashion. We've never ever done with North Lakes has never had sewing machines ever. So that's yeah.
You go. You've got home economics with textiles and food at the moment.
That's in winter textile.
They're dropping textiles and just going to offer them technology.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of students. That's why our schools think we have to do design, because it's too you in grade 10 for doing graphic design, IT, and textiles. And the food industry does little hospitality, and our schools they can run and and my design course I can look around to my comments as well. But I have no idea how to make it right now. So it's the design course. And then digital solutions course. But they're saying that they can make numbers and numbers. I've got the menu numbers just now.
Yeah. I don't think I'll have an issue with this. Just saying, just putting it out there.
Okay, so we are gonna now work on the next project, cover a few more things, and this will give you a lot more tools. Like if you want to have something that is moving and, for example, bounces from one side to the other, or something that is always rotating. So now things are going to start to move a little bit more. At the moment, nothing really moves. We have just like very strong interactions. And so we're gonna open a different folder this time. It will be the game2 folder in the starting files. So make sure that you can open that in your code editor and also on your web browser. If you selected on your web browser the starting files, you're obviously currently on the game that we made. And then what you can do here in the URL is basically try to go back to the root folder here. So delete all of this stuff, and so you're back on that folder, and then you can select the game2 folder. And then on the game2 you can select index.html, which at the moment doesn't have anything. And on the code editor, I'm first going to show you the files, and then we'll start coding. So the first file is the HTML file, which is the same that we had before. So there's no changes there for now. It has this viewport setting so that this works well on the phones, and it imports the phaser.min.js file, the phaser library, and our main.js file. And then we have our main.js file in here. And our main.js file already comes with some code. First of all, we have the game state here, and we have the init method. So this is where you set game settings. So this method is called before preload, and it is where you set things such as the screen scaling. This is something that I always include in the games, where most of the time this is the type of scaling that I want, so that it fits the browser. You already have this file, so you don't have to type this, right?
Just put it in the comments.
Oh, yeah, okay. And then we have preload, which is where we load all the assets. And the only asset that is being loaded here is the background image. And then we have the create method. This is called once after the assets were loaded. Now, you've seen how we load all the assets and then start the game. And that is a bit different to how a normal web page works. And the reason why this works this way is because we've all opened a website where not all the images are ready, right? And you open a website and the images are little by little loading on a slow connection. But on a game, that would be unforgivable. Imagine the game loads and the enemy just looks like a black square, and then 10 seconds later it looks like an enemy. You would not want to have that in the game. That is why everything is loaded beforehand in this manner. And then the game only starts once things are loaded. So we're going to start here by showing our background, and that should be something that is more familiar to you. So that will be, we're going to show the background, and this will be this.add.sprite in the top left corner, 0, 0, and the image is called background.
Was it image or sprite?
Sprite. So if we save that, we should be able to have this different background now. That is the background that we'll use in this new game. So let me know once everyone has the background loaded, because that means that you've got the right files, the right folder. Yeah. You guys good here?
Just,
Yeah.
just checking.
Yeah. Were you able to check?
Yeah,
So you picked the second one there?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. So now we are going to load the player. So we'll do the player just like before. And if I show you what the images are, we have a bunch of images here. So I'll bring those. I'll show you those images. The player that well, we have the previous images that actually I'm going to delete because they're not part of this game. These are the images that we'll use here, and this is the player, a Valkyria warrior, like a Wonder Woman, if you've seen it. All right, so the first step is to preload the.
Gender neutral.
That's what I'm trying to keep it balanced, you know. So this will be this .load.image, and we're going to call this the player. And again, we type assets/player.png. And save that. So this is similar to what we have been doing, and then we are going to show this in a certain position. So I'm going to show the player, and I'm going to type this.add.sprite, and in here I want it to be centered vertically. So on X I'll give it, let's say, 10 pixels, and then I want it to be half. So I could either go and type 180, which is half of the height, or I can type this.world.height divided by 2. So that is, I think, a more flexible approach. And this is called player. So we add that like so. And then we want to change the anchor point. So that means that I should probably be putting this into a variable, because we'll be doing a lot of things with our player. And then player.anchor.set to 0.5.
That's what happened before.
Yeah, so you always assign the anchor point after you've created the variable. And now we are able to see it there. But it is a little bit too far on the left, so instead of 10, maybe try something like 30 or 40. And refresh until it looks okay. So that is still too far, so let's try 60. And with 60, I think it should be okay. So that is a good starting point for the player. And the way this game is going to work, this player will be moving all the way here. Every time that we touch the screen or click on the screen, this will be moving to the right until it reaches a treasure. That's the part that you will implement as a challenge.
So can I use the 918 and just type in there?
Sorry?
That's it.
All right, so we've got our player, and now I would like to be able to move this player. So I will introduce a new function here that we haven't seen that's called update. So after create is called just once after everything is loaded. So that code only runs once in your game. But then update is a method that runs on every frame. And every frame, the phaser tries to aim at 60 frames per second. But that will depend on the device. Some devices might have slower performance, but that is the maximum. So this update is called on every frame. So in here you will add everything that you want to be happening at all times. This will be called update. Sorry, is this font size okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we're gonna create a function like so. And this will be run on every single frame. So we can have we want to be able to access our player, and just for the sake of this exercise, to rotate our player to make it like rotate all the time. So if I want to access my player, I need to place it into the current context, into the current object. So instead of var player, I'm going to type this.player. And in here, I'm also going to type this.player because I want to access my player from a different method. So now I can access my player here, and we can rotate the player. So I can type this.player.angle, and I'm going to rotate it by, let's say, 1 degree per frame. So this.player.angle equals this.player.angle plus 1. Or if you want to code this, you can also add plus equal 1. It's the same thing. Once I do that and save and refresh my page, I'm getting now the player to rotate. And I can also change the position of the player in this manner. We can change the position by, for example, of x. I could do this.player dot position is an object that the phaser sprites have. It's an object, and then you can do .x or .y. So I can change, for example, the position of x, and again type this is equal to the current position plus 1, or plus 2, or plus any number that you want. And if I save that and refresh the page, my sprite is now moving and rotating. So everything that you add in here is checked, is done at all times. So what I'm going to do now is, we don't really want to rotate the player for the game. So I will turn this into a comment so that we don't execute this anymore, and we keep it there just for your own reference. So I'm going to go and get rid of that. Because what I want is my enemy, I want to have an enemy, a dragon, that is going to move up and down, up and down, up and down. And we will have to move our character to avoid that enemy. So let's begin by loading the file of our enemy. Let's bring our enemy in. Call this enemy. And I think the image file is called dragon.png. This one, yeah, dragon.png. So assets/dragon.png. Say semicolon. Then in create, we are also going to do the same thing, but for our enemy. So something that you want to do in programming, you always want to be as lazy as you can by not repeating the same task twice. So I'm going to copy and paste everything here and type in show enemy, and then copy this enemy and just replace it in here and in here. And now the position on X of my enemy, I would like my enemy to be just a little bit more on the, like, we can position it in the middle, so that we can position it in the middle and the middle of the height as well. So what I'll do here, instead of 60, this is going to be this.world.width divided by 2. And then I'm going to save that. 60 is a distance on X, and that is 60 pixels starting from the left side, so sort of like here. And I want my enemy to be in the absolute half of the screen. This.world.width will do it, divided by 2. And we are also setting the anchor point of enemy to the middle, so that point is in the middle of the screen. It's literally in the middle of the screen, both on X and Y. So now if I save that, I realize that I made a mistake here because I see the same player character. So it is because I forgot to replace this player here by enemy. So that we are referring to the correct image here. Remember that is the name that we gave this image when we loaded it. So I'm going to save that and press F5 and get the dragon there. And now I want my dragon to move up and down, up and down, up and down forever. So let's start by moving it up. And we all know from I guess it is taught at schools that speed is equal to distance divided by time. So the distance is equal to speed times the time. And so what I'm going to do is set a speed for my enemy up in here in init, because this is where you set the game settings. So general parameters of your game, like think of buttons that you might want to change. I like to put them all up here at in the same area. Like for example, the speed of my characters, how much they can jump, or how much energy they have. It's an option to put it here. So inside of init, I'm going to add here some game variables. And I'm going to tap this dot enemy speed, and we'll start with a speed of 2, and then if it's too fast we can reduce it, or if it's too slow we can increase it. So we've got the speed here, and now we want to move our enemy.
Enemy speed equals 2.
Oh, sorry. We've got that, and now we can access this right elsewhere in our code. So we can access that on update. And inside of update, like we said, speed equals to distance divided by time. Therefore, distance equals to speed times time. So I can get the distance that should be moving each time by using that formula. So the distance, let's call it d, or dist, is equal to the speed, which we said that was enemy speed, times the time that has passed between each one of these iterations. So between each one of these calls, between each frame, and that, if I'm not wrong, it is phaser. It is this dot time dot delta time. But let me quickly double check that this is the case. Let me check that from the document. Oh, I still have to show you the documentation of phaser, which I'll do. So after I get the enemy moving, we'll sort out launch, and I'll show you the documentation, and then we'll continue. All right. So let me just quickly. So this. Oh, there it is. Yeah, this dot time dot elapsed, like so. So that will be the distance that we need to move. Now let's move the enemy by that distance, and we can do that by accessing our enemy, this dot enemy, accessing the enemy position, accessing the Y component of the enemy position, and that should be equal to the current position. So this same value plus the distance. And if we check it here, it's not loading. So let's see. There might be an error. So I'm going to go and inspect and click on the console. And it says here, enemy speed is not defined, line number 37. So then I go line number 37, and I realize that I made a mistake, because this should be this dot enemy speed. So that is why the console is so important, and you should always have it open when you're doing phaser, because it tells you exactly what's going wrong. Well, ideally, sometimes the errors are very cryptic. So if we try again, we are not seeing any movement here. So
Did he move really quickly, or?
Did you move off the screen?
I'm not sure, eh? Like, let me try something here. Game state dot time dot elapsed. Oh yeah, you're right. It moved. Yeah. It moved probably super fast. So this, let's try with a much smaller number, like so. 0.02, and try again. There we go. So a lot of game development is just tweaking. You try a number, it's too fast, it's too slow, then you try half the value or double the value. In this case, I'm gonna set this to 0, 1. And there we go. So now I'm gonna make a quick pause and give you guys something to do while I sort out the lunch. So what you're gonna do here is go to a URL with the phaser documentation, which is docs.phaser.io. So that is one of the websites. Docs.phaser.io is the official documentation of Phaser. So this is a bit of a more technical document. It's a more technical documentation that includes the parameters of each one of the methods. But the one that's really helpful for when you're learning is another website called examples.phaser.io. So let's load that one. So the examples website is part of the official website as well. Has examples on every single thing that you can think of. For example, let's look at something that we might have already done. We've already worked with sprites, right? So if you click sprites, then you see all of these little demos. It takes a bit of time to load, but let's say add a sprite or add an image. You click on that one, and you see the result here. You see the result, and in here you see the code. And this is very helpful, because then you can see, oh, you know, I forgot how to play a sound, or I forgot how to align, or I want to learn something new. You can just go explore here. And all of these things can normally be copy and pasted to your code. The only difference is that they don't use an object for the states like I did. It's like they kind of define the state right here. So when they type game.load, we type this.load. But other than that, it's the same. So have a look at the examples.phaser.io and also the docs.phaser.io. The docs might be a bit more advanced. And this one has a lot of really interesting things. All right.
So, for lunch,
Has anyone got any
Rotation, you know, object dot property dot.
Yeah, exactly. That's all object-oriented mindset in general.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so we are going to continue with the game 2, and we'll see. Like, I think we'll be fine to do the 3 games and then the deployment section. But if it's too late, by the time we finish game 2, we'll do the deployment section and then game 3, just because that part, you know, it's important to cover. So, just a quick recap here. So what we have is a character on a screen, and we have an enemy that moves off the screen. So what we would like to do is an update to somehow check a condition that the enemy doesn't go beyond a certain point. And does anyone have a suggestion how we can check a condition in a programming language?
if statement?
If statement, yes. So what we can set here is an if statement, and the condition that we want to set is that the position in Y is not beyond a certain point here. And that is completely arbitrary, where we can say how far we want the enemy to move. So I'm gonna kind of guesstimate a number of like 300 and see how it feels with that number. And if it's too high, I can reduce. If it's too low, I can increase. So I'm gonna copy this position and check that position is, if this is greater or equal than the limit, we want to reverse the movement, right? Likewise, once we reverse the movement, the speed will be to the other direction, and then we also want to check up here that we reached another limiting point. So we want to check another condition here, that the enemy position is not too small. If it's too small, it means that we're almost reaching the top. So we also have to reverse that. So if this number is less or equal than, let's say, 60, we're also going to reverse the movement. And how can we reverse the movement? We can make an adjustment for the speed. So our speed value is positive, right? It is 2, and because it's positive, it means it's going down. If we make this negative, it will allow us to move up. So what we can do is make our speed negative number, right? So it was 2 before, and now it can be -2. But there's a better way of doing that, because what if I change my speed to 3, I will have to come back here and change this to -3. So that might be a little bit complex. What I can do instead is multiply whichever number we have here by -1. So that if it was, whatever number it was, it will be multiplied by -1. And the same thing applies in here. So that if this was negative, it becomes positive, and if it was positive, it becomes negative. So if we try this, and we get the enemy moving within a certain range. And this part here looks a little bit, we're doing the same operation in these two cases, right? So we could use an OR operation here and join these two conditions as one. So I can type in OR, which is 2 of these vertical lines, and cut this and paste it here, and get rid of the else if. So just to recap what we're doing, we are checking that if the enemy position has gone beyond 300, so it's sort of like this area, or if it's gone above 60, which would be, let's say, somewhere here, if any of those conditions are true, we are reversing the speed of the enemy. So we've got that going, and what I want to add now is for me to, whenever I click on the screen, or when I tap on the screen, if this was on a touch screen, I want my player to move to this direction. I want it to move at a certain speed. So we should also define a speed for our player up in here, in init. So I'm going to set another value here for the speed of my player. I'm going to call this player speed, and set this to 0.2. It will move faster than the enemy. Our player will have to avoid the enemy. And now, oops, sorry. Okay, so we've got the speed for the player, right? And if we just wanted to move the player without us doing anything, we can easily just move it like we've done before, right? So we could also type in that speed. We know from physics that speed equals to distance divided by time, and therefore the distance should be equal to the speed times the time. And in here we call this dist, but this was distance for the enemy, so well, it would have been ideal to call that dist enemy, but I'm just going to call this one dist player. So how much the player will move. The player will move the speed of the player, player speed times the elapsed time, which is the time in between each one of these calls. So then we can move our player by that distance. So let's type in move player. We can type in this dot player dot position dot x equals the same thing plus the distance. Oh, sorry, this is equal the same thing plus the distance. Oops. It's yeah. Sorry about that. This player. And if I press if I reload the game, the player is moving. But like we said, we want to have control of that movement. We want to use the click for when the player moves. So instead of moving the player blindly, we want to have another if statement here, so that we check if we are clicking on the screen. So we need to check that here, that we are clicking on the screen, and if that is true, we are going to be moving the player. And how can we check that? Well, we already learned how to detect input on a single sprite, but there's a way to detect input just in general, like anywhere on the screen, if you're clicking anywhere. So I'm going to use that way here. And that is this.input.activePointer.isDown. So this is something that you don't have to know in advance. It's something that you can copy and reuse on the games. This is basically testing whether this is the click is being pressed or not. And if that is the case, we increase the position of the player by a certain distance. So if I go now here, it's not moving, and if I click, it moves. And if I stop clicking, it doesn't move. And now I can avoid the enemy. And I would like to add a collision between the enemy and the player, so that we lose the game. If we run into the dragon, we lose the game, and then we restart the game. So for that, I'm going to add that all the way here at the bottom of my update method. So we're going to check the collision between the player and the enemy. So I'm going to create a variable that's going to be called bouncePlayer, and the player is a rectangle, and all the sprites have a rectangle with coordinates. And what I'm going to do now is just use some methods that Phaser has, so that we can check if two rectangles intersect each other. So this will be this.player.getBounce. That will give me the bounding box of the player. And I can do the same thing for my enemy. So this this is a bounce enemy. This.enemy.getBounce. And now we check the collision here with an if statement. And what we use to check collision is a method that comes from Phaser as well, which is phaser.rectangle.intersects. And then we pass in both bounds, both bounding boxes. So bounce player and bounce enemy. And then we need to open the curly brackets for our if statement. So that is quite a line of code. And what it does, it checks that two rectangles are intersecting each other. So you can use that with any kinds of sprites. You get you always follow the same steps. You get both rectangles, and then you check the intersection of the rectangles. And if they are intersecting, we can what we'll do is run the game again. And there are different ways of doing that, but what I'll do is type this.state.start game state, which is similar to what we added at the beginning of our game. At the very beginning, it is how we start our game, but we access that game. So this is when we started the workshop this morning, and now it's the same thing, but with this.
Can you just give us a moment to catch up?
Yeah.
Pablo, what are the conventions with capital letters? So phase and rectangle in the capitals, but intersects in the lowercase?
Usually, so when it comes to these ones, they come from the Phaser library, so we have no control over those. Yeah. And usually the uppercase is used for objects that are objects that have many a lot of functionality in them, that have utilities that we can utilize. So those are usually referred to with uppercase. Yeah. And then the ones with lowercase are a method. It's a method itself, or just a single property or a single object.
Okay.
Down?
Oh, sorry.
The player part? Down? Sorry, I'm not.
Who was that?
I'm gonna try to bring this a bit closer.
Can you change the bounding box for a rectangle?
Yes. So the bounding box, I think it has four, or I think it has 2 points, x, y. And if you want to see what the object looks like, you can always type console.log, which is how we can show things in the console, and then bounce player. And then in the browser itself, if I run this, we're getting this shown many times because this is called each frame, and it is a type. It has all these properties. It has a height, x, y, and it is a type rectangle. And in the documentation, there's methods for rectangles, how you can interact with them or modify them. So I'm gonna delete that. Does anyone need me to show some information here in particular? No?
Yeah, just thank you.
Oh yeah, okay. So any questions regarding how we are checking the borders for this part?
Okay, but I don't seem to really have a problem here, Pablo.
Yeah.
So I would select all of these and try to indent that, like move it back so that it.
Oh, indented.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
So that it all looks the same.
Yeah, it looks pretty. Yeah, there is a.
You can press Shift Tab will send that back.
Okay.
This whole part here.
There's a whole. There's a toggle. Yeah, whereabouts in brackets? There's a thing that does it for you.
So what do you want bounce? Can I see the definition of this? Oh no, so this enemy dot position dot y. That is missing. That will do it because you were basically overriding this enemy bypass number. So let's check the enemy. So that's the enemy position. Also, you to calculate this. Oh yeah, the distance of the enemy is there.
And I've got dragon, yeah. Yeah.
Are you defining this dot enemy at the beginning?
Formats it for you.
Yeah, and speed, speed. Yeah, no, that's all it is. Why is there enter there? Or is that? Oh yeah, they're right. Okay. Oh, so this. Oh yeah, that's correct. Can I try something?
Sorry. There's two ones using 55JS.
Oh, sorry. So this, when we reach the border, what we want is to change the enemy speed. So this should be enemy speed.
Well, you could be before this.
Yeah, that should do it.
And that's probably just, I've still got enemy speed. That's one of my variables. But my sprite is called dragon, so
Yeah, it's like
That's my concept.
minus 64 or like 64. Oh yeah, it's missing a dot.
You,
so
yeah,
cheeks get
you,
brought
yeah,
up
well,
later.
I like that. I like the cheeks as well. I
Mm.
thought it was cute, Andrew.
So easy to
I
make,
get that, yeah. Sorry, I looked down, so I thought I must say,
Yeah,
I like this.
but usually
Yeah.
that's the difference in JavaScript.
You disappeared
That's
after a
using
while, like.
phaser.js. Like, it's hard. It's really not much. And if you go to that JavaScript one, it's fucking loads more.
Help me out, whatever. If I go in, maybe it's this is.
That's pretty good. But I had to do the JavaScript because I use that SDKs.
Okay, so I think there's another thing that has to do with having like multiple screens on the game, but I think I'm gonna leave that if we have more time, because it might make things a bit more difficult if we have too many screens. So we'll work with this screen, and now what we'll do is the next challenge. So you guys will complete game number 2, and this is gonna be easier than the previous one, I promise you. So the challenge here is to add a gold treasure. So let me at the end, and basically, we're going to do the following. So we're going to load another sprite and position it here. And the sprite that we're going to load is the treasure image. So we're going to load the image, place it here, and add another one of these rectangle checks, something like this, where we compare the player with the treasure. And if the player arrived at the treasure, we also run the same method here. So I'll write down like all the steps that you need to do.